everybody, welcome again to another exciting episode of Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, Cypher here, and we are going to come at you pretty quickly with a ton of news. But first, before we get into that, welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us live here on Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook. This is the CSP News Roundup. And what is that? Well, the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup is a weekly show where yours truly talks about the news that was with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. The news that you are about to see here is legitimately crowdsourced from a ton of different areas and different news sources across the political spectrum. And then we get input on what people want to hear throughout the week, starting around Sunday or so the week before. So if you want to see something on the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, go ahead and hit us up across all social media and let us know what you want to hear from us, and we will be happy to oblige. If this is the first time you're joining us and you don't know anything about Crowdsourced Politics, well, we've been streaming for about a year or so. We've been podcasting for about 2. We've had people come and go, but we're still going strong. We have multiple podcasts that we do. One of those is called Cypher State. Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where we go into a little bit more in depth on a particular issue facing the geopolitical stage. This last episode that we did was called Narco State, where we looked at what is befalling Central and South America when it comes to drug cartels and the kind of things that precipitated their rise and what could possibly be done to solve that. Crowdsourced Politics, the Cypher State pulls in people from across the political spectrum to talk about these issues from Twitch and YouTube. If you would like to be on the show, again, reach out to us and we will see what we can do to get you on a particular topic. Now, this typically happens on the third Sunday of every month, but because of vacations and other things going on, it might not be on that exact day. So we do say that we will do it at least once a month, and we've been keeping to that schedule except during Christmas. So if you want to get on that, again, typically third Sunday of every month, reach out to us if you want to get on, you want to hear a particular topic, us to tell us a particular topic, and again, we'll be happy to oblige. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the news. And welcome back, everybody. So glad for you to join us. Let's go ahead and get started. Also, I'm going to have some music playing in the background. If it's too loud, please let me know in chat and I will turn it down. I just think it might give a little more ambiance to the chat and everything that we're doing while I talk. All right, let's get started. So up first, we are going to discuss national politics and the thing that is blowing up across social media when it comes to this, and that is, of course, what is going on between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. This is the biggest news story for Congress since last week, and it's what's happening with the looming showdown in Ukraine. As we've reported before on the Roundup, Russia has amassed more than 127,000 troops on Ukraine's eastern and northern borders. This number does not include troops now arriving in Belarus. And so we're going to have a map shown on here and talk about this a bit. So make sure that I heard correctly. Oh, good. And zoom in. There we go. So let's talk about it. So there are rumors of possible war as President Biden threatens punishing sanctions on both Russia and Putin personally, and our allies mobilize to support Ukraine. So what is Congress working on? Before going on their break, negotiations were underway around a sanctions bill that they hope will deter Putin from further military incursions into Ukraine. Despite their absence from the floor, negotiations are said to be ramping up behind the scenes. Indeed, according to The Hill, the Congress is, quote, racing to hammer out a deal on Russian sanctions legislation. The chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee has indicated there is broad bipartisan support for leveling these sanctions. Congress is under pressure to have a sealed deal by the time they return to the Capitol, as experts warned that the window for deterring Putin is rapidly closing. The sanctions Congress is, so let's talk about a little bit about the sanctions, and this is reporting coming out of the Hill as well as some other places. The sanctions Congress is considering would target Russian officials and financial institutions if Biden determines Russia has invaded or had a significant, quote, escalation of hostilities against Ukraine. The measure would also require Biden to identify and sanction other sectors of the Russian economy if he determines doing so is in the interest of U.S. national security. The bill also authorizes sanctions on companies in Russia that offer secure messaging systems, including SWIFT, the international system by which banks communicate. It also includes additional security assistance and provisions to help Ukraine push back against Russian disinformation. But senators are discussing changes to the legislation aimed at winning over at least 10 Republicans, the number they'll need to break a potential filibuster on the Senate floor. Republicans are pushing for legislation to include some immediate sanction authority, arguing that Putin should be punished financially for the buildup along Russia's border with Ukraine. So this is saying, hey, the mere buildup. Hold on a second. I greatly apologize for that. I've got a slight cold and allergies, so we're going to be dealing with that. Now, let's continue on though. So what we are seeing here is that, what was I? Okay. So what we're seeing here is that Republicans are saying the mere buildup of Russian troops along the border, which you can see here, Belarus is to the north, Russia is to the east, and then Crimea, of course, is to the south, which is part of Russia now. So, oh, you guys couldn't see my let me go ahead and turn that on. All right. So, yep, Ukraine, right? Russia, Belarus. So they are really surrounded on all sides. And Eastern Europe here, which is where the United States is thinking of stationing troops, more on that later, would also be able to provide support in order to deter Russian aggression going beyond Eastern Ukraine. So let's continue. So what Republicans are saying is that the mere buildup of troops along the border isn't just a military exercise, but an act of aggression, and Putin personally should be punished for doing so. Now, according to Russia, the existence of NATO and its potential expansion more eastward to include Ukraine is an act of aggression, and therefore they are in the right to build up troops to prevent such actions from taking place. Both sides of this debate have a little bit of a point. However, you are not, morally speaking, not allowed to violate the sovereign integrity of another nation, and an act of war, an aggressive act of war where you are the aggressor, you lose moral authority in total. This is, of course, according to the ever so poignant just war theory by Waltzer. So this is something that I'm going to harp on a lot on this program going forward, and everything else like that. So that's what we're seeing here, right? But let's continue on. So the ongoing negotiations include discussions of both sanctions that would immediate sanctions that would be triggered if Russia invades Ukraine, a Senate source told The Hill. A perennial sticking point has been what to do with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which will carry gas from Russia to Germany. Now, this is another very important topic here. Germany has committed to fighting climate change, but at the same time has greatly reduced its capacity in nuclear energy. And it has to get that capacity back from somewhere. Where are they going? Cheap Russian natural gas. As long as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline goes into Germany, Germany has access to the Russian oil market or the natural gas market, and then can actually build up its reserves. And this is a very important point. This is a very important point. So when Ukraine, or when Germany is trying to get this gas, they are beholden to a degree to Russian whims. And we saw that with Germany saying it would not supply arms to Ukraine in an attempt to not have Russia cut that pipeline off or other pipelines that go into Germany. So this is a very complicated topic. Now, let's continue on. Senator James Risch, Republican from Idaho, and Texas Republican Michael McCall, the top Republicans on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, have offered legislation that includes sanctions provisions targeting the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And what we're about to talk about now is breaking news today from the BBC. Now, according to the BBC, this morning that both Germany and the US will axe the Nord Stream pipeline if Russia violates Ukraine's sovereignty. This is a very important development because it means that Germany is actually willing to play ball and deter aggression. Because as much as Russia likes having the influence over Germany and the money that would come from Germany for the Nord Stream pipeline, Germany is saying, no, we don't want you to violate another country's sovereignty. So this would also designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism if it invades Ukraine. Quote, now is the time to put sanctions on, not after the fact, I mean. If you want to deter somebody, do it now. There are plenty of reasons right now to put sanctions on, Risch said during an interview with Fox News. The ongoing negotiations include discussions of both sanctions that would be immediate and sanctions that would be triggered if Russia invades Ukraine, a Senate source told The Hill. The negotiations come as events around Ukraine move quickly, injecting a curveball into the talks where any congressional action is effectively on hold until at least next week. Russia has failed to heed repeated calls by the US to pull back its more than 100,000 troops near the Ukrainian border, a signal that diplomacy is actually stalling. The United Kingdom is further warning Moscow that Moscow plans to install a pro-Russian leadership within Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. The State Department on Sunday announced that it ordered the evaluation of family evacuation. Let me start over completely on that. So furthermore, the State Department on Sunday announced that it had ordered the evacuation of family members of U.S. government employees in Ukraine and authorized the departure of non-essential staff. Biden on Tuesday reiterated he wouldn't send U.S. troops into Ukraine, but vowed there would be serious economic consequences, including sanctions directly on Putin if he moved into Ukraine. Quote, if he were to move in with those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world, Biden told reporters. Senator Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that this week that he had spoken to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to urge the administration to take action before a potential invasion. Quote, what I've been hearing is encouraging, that they prepare to take steps before an incursion, not afterwards, McConnell had said. It appears to me that the administration is moving in the right direction. News that broke yesterday afternoon will only increase the urgency of this action. Now, this is reporting as of 3 p.m. today, so we're covering a lot of ground here, and then I'm going to pontificate on this. So Russia warned it would quickly take retaliatory measures if the US and its allies rejected its security demands over NATO and Ukraine. As previously stated, Russia wants a red line, a hard line in the sand. Do not cross, do not pass go, do not collect $200 for the United States to make assurances that Ukraine would never join NATO. Now, the warning raises pressure on the West amid concerns that Moscow is planning to invade. The Kremlin has repeatedly denied any such designs, yet, as we see, fucking all over the border. The Kremlin also repeatedly denied any such designs. Despite the denials, the US and its NATO allies are worried about Russia deploying troops near Ukraine and launching a series of sweeping military maneuvers. Because what's the difference between a prep invasion and a military exercise along the border? Nothing. Not a damn thing. It can go from 0 to 60 and that. Right? Now, despite as part of the drills, there are motorized infantry and artillery units in southwestern Russia practicing firing line ammunitions. Warplanes in Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea performing bombing runs. Dozens of warships sailed for training exercises in the Baltic Sea and the Arctic. And Russia fighter jets and paratroopers arrived in Belarus for joint war games. Sure seems like they're prepping for a fucking invasion to me. At stake is the future of Ukraine. Russia has demanded guarantees that NATO will never admit the country and other ex-Soviet nations as members, and that the alliance will roll back its troop deployments in other former Soviet bloc nations. Some of these, like the membership pledge, are non-starters for NATO, creating a seemingly intractable stalemate that many fear can only end in war. Speaking to lawmakers, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, I got tongue-tied, said he and other top officials would advise Vladimir Putin on the next steps after receiving written replies from the United States to the demands. Asked by lawmakers if Russia could expand military cooperation with Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua as part of its retaliatory measures, Lavrov responded that Moscow has close ties with these countries in the Western Hemisphere and is seeking to deepen. He noted Putin spoke by phone with the three nations' leaders last week, and they agreed to, quote, consider ways to further deepening our strategic cooperation. Earlier this month, Lavrov's deputy pointedly refused to rule out the deployment of Russian military assets to Cuba and Venezuela if Moscow's security demands are not met. Now, amid escalating tensions, Ukrainian officials have sought to calm nerves. Ukraine's foreign minister, Kubla, said that while the concentration of Russian troops near Ukraine poses a threat, the number is now insufficient for a large-scale offensive. They are still missing some key military elements and systems to mount a full-scale offensive, Kubla told reporters. As others have pointed out, he noted that causing alarm could be an end in itself. Russia, he said, hopes to destabilize Ukraine by spreading panic, raising pressure on Ukraine's financial systems, and launching cyber attacks. Now, the cyber attack thing is very important to mention here because that is exactly what Russia did prior to the invasion of Georgia. They launched a concentrated, all-out cyber assault on all of Georgia's key infrastructures that were connected to the internet, or they could get access to computers through spies or whatever have you, and shut down most of its telecommunications networks, and also took out power grids and the internet. By doing so, they were able to basically launch a surprise attack within Georgia and occupy its territory, and at the end of the day, do things and get concessions and install, or at least pressure, the leadership in Georgia in order to bend to Russians' demands. So let's continue on. Quote, President Putin would be happy to see that plan succeed so that he doesn't even need to turn to military force to put Ukraine in a vulnerable position, Kubla had further stated. Now, less than an hour after this news was reported, the United States and NATO responded according to an updated report from the Associated Press. The Biden administration and NATO told Russia on Wednesday that there will be no US or NATO concessions on Moscow's main demands to resolve the crisis over Ukraine. In separate written responses delivered to the Russians, the US and NATO held firm in the alliance's open door policy for membership. They, quote, rejected demands to permanently ban Ukraine from joining, and said allied deployments of troops and military equipment in Eastern Europe are non-negotiable. Quote, there is no change. There will be no change, Secretary of State Antony Blinken had said. Also not up for negotiation will be the US and Europe's response to any invasion of Ukraine. He repeated the mantra that any incursion would be met with massive consequences and severe economic cost. Seeking possible off-ramps that would allow Russia to withdraw its troops deployed near the Ukraine border without appearing to have lost a battle of wills, the US response did outline areas in which some of Russia's concerns might be addressed, provided it de-escalates tensions in Ukraine. Speaking to reporters in Washington, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia would be surprised by the contents of the several-page American document. Quote, all told, it sets out serious diplomatic path forward. Should Russia choose it, he continued on, the document we've delivered includes concerns of the United States and our allies and partners about Russia's actions that undermine security, a principled and pragmatic evaluation of the concerns that Russia has raised, and our own proposals for areas where we may be able to find common ground. Blinken said that he hoped to speak with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov about the response in the coming days, but he stressed that the decision about pursuing diplomacy or conflict rests with Russia, and more specifically with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Quote, Blinken stated, "We will see how they respond, but there's no doubt in my mind that if Russia were to approach this seriously and in spirit of reciprocity with a determination to enhance collective security for all of us, there are very positive things in this document that could be pursued. We can't make that decision for President Putin." Shortly after Blinken spoke, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that the alliance had sent a separate reply to Russia with an offer to improve communications, examines ways to improve military incidents of accidents, avoid military incidents or accidents, and discuss arms control. But like Blinken, he rejected any attempt to halt membership. We cannot and will not compromise on the principle of which the security of our alliance and security of Europe and North America rest, Stoltenberg said. This is about respecting nations and their rights to choose their own path. Russia should refrain from coercive force posturing, aggressive rhetoric, and malign activities directed against allies and other nations, allies being NATO allies. Russia should also withdraw its forces from Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, where they are deployed without the country's consent, he said. The U.S. proposals, echoed in the NATO document, include the potential for negotiations over offensive missile platform, and military exercises in Eastern Europe as well, and broad arms control agreements as long as Russia withdraws its troops from the Ukrainian border and agrees to halt inflammatory rhetoric designed to deepen divisions and discord among allies within Ukraine itself. In another development, presidential advisor from Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany met for more than 5 hours in Paris on Wednesday over the long-running conflict in the eastern part of the country between Moscow-backed separatists. Although there were no breakthroughs, they promised to meet for new talks in 2 weeks in Berlin. The French president's office said in a statement that after the talks that the parties support, quote, unconditional respect for a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. The talks focused on the 2015 Minsk peace agreement aimed at ending the conflict, and the statement didn't address the current concerns about a Russian invasion. Ukraine's representative, Andriy Yermak, said the meetings went hours longer than expected and marked the first real advance in talks since December of 2019. That's a long-ass time. He said the talks organized by the French and Germans were crucial, quote, even when things were not so tense, and now we know that it is more crucial than ever. So that was a lot, okay? And here's the deal, all right? Well, to quote Biden here. Russia's concerns are not without merit. As stated earlier when I was going through this document, that doesn't mean that Russia gets to invade another country to stop it. If we believe in self-determination of peoples, and if we believe in democracy, if we believe in sovereign territory integrity, etc., then we, people that believe these things, should be against Russia's incursions into eastern Ukraine, which have already happened, right? Russia claimed that though there's no military personnel in Ukraine against the Ukrainians' wishes, there's just some volunteers that had a love for Ukraine and volunteering, and we can't stop them. That's bullshit. 100%, no doubt about it, bullshit. Those are either a combination of mercenaries paid for by Russia, or regular military forces under the guise of volunteering in order to prevent Putin himself from getting political backlash within Russia, because the Russians don't want this shit either, or at least they didn't. Things change, right? They might want it now, but who knows? Okay, I'll turn the music off. Thanks. So continue on. Sorry about the music. I thought I had it low enough, but maybe I'd. Oh, am I loud enough now? Oh no. I'm sorry, everybody. I accidentally had my mic all the way turned down. When I moved it, I turned it down. So the music, jeez, guys, I wish there was somebody who would have told me. Oh well. Well, anyways, continuing on. So, where was I? Yes. So Russia has been in Ukraine since the eastern Ukraine has basically developed a guerrilla warfare against central Ukraine, partly due to propaganda from Russia, and also due to some internal issues between Ukrainians and ethnic Russians along eastern Ukraine. Now, we have a north-south divide in the United States. So South America's got a kind of a different culture, or South America, the southern area of the United States has somewhat of a different culture than the northern area. Tends to be a bit more rural, etc. Those differences, not problems, those differences exist within Ukraine as well, but it's split between west and eastern Ukraine. And so there's some tension there that makes a lot of sense. And so, yeah. Now, one thing that I don't like, and this is a thing that has been irking me debating with people online a lot, is this idea that it's not at all the US's problem. 100% not our jam, not our bag, baby, not our bag, not our jam, not our problem, not our state, not our country, not our problem. And there is a partly problem with that. While I understand the sentiment, and I understand that the US doesn't have much room to talk about violating the sovereign territory of other nations, given Iraq, at least Iraq. You can make debates about other places, Libya, possibly Yemen, some countries in Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, etc. It still doesn't make it right. And while the US shouldn't play world police, there are instances where the US is the only ones that will when it's needed. And we saw that in the 90s. We saw that with Desert Storm. We saw that with a lot of justified conflicts that the United States played a part in. And if the US doesn't do it, nobody else will. And I'm not here to promote domino theory, all right? Domino theory was a theory where if one nation fell to communism, more nations would fall to communism. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is that if you don't deter aggression, and people believe that you are not going to get involved in the violation of sovereignty from other countries, they will believe they have full autonomy to do so without any pushback. And with a country like Russia, especially with how it's built up its own internal, its own internal economy, and gotten some trading with China and some other places, economic sanctions against Russia won't necessarily hurt Russia. It might hurt some of the big boys that want to travel all the time, go to like beach trips in Europe, things like that. But it won't put any actual damper on Russia itself, which is kind of a good thing. You don't want to like punish the people of a country for what its leadership is doing. But that means that there's nothing at stake for Putin to continue to do this, since his people won't care, since the economic sanctions won't affect them. And because that's the case, absent military involvement in some capacity, I do not see Russia saying, "Hey, well, we're good. We're not gonna push into Eastern Ukraine," because they've already have, right? And so there's a lot of like worry among the anti-war factions of right-wing and left-wing people. There's been worry about World War III happening over this. I think that's overblown. There's not going to be nuclear fucking catastrophe just because Putin couldn't incur into Ukraine and take it over or mold it into the image that he wants. What the worst that will happen from this is a lot of people within Ukraine dying. It won't spill over to a broader conflict. But even if Russia itself, even if we don't do anything and Russia invades, that's still a lot of people dying in Ukraine. And the difference is that Russia will be successful if no one stands up to Russia. It will not be a long, bloody conflict unless, of course, they get involved in a protracted guerrilla war. And of course, that's a high possibility. But it will put Russia that much closer to countries that it has traditionally, historically oppressed, taken over, turned into vassal states, etc. So, if you are one to care about this, I personally believe that if you do, you should be in support of what the actions Biden has taken so far. This isn't to say that we should go to open war with Russia. That would be bad for everybody. I don't think that's going to happen, but there needs to be some sort of deterrent, and there needs to be some sort of deterrence. And of course, if you're implementing a deterrence, that does raise the stakes. So remember that. But I think that is all I'm going to say about Ukraine. So let's continue on with some other news. Now, this is more congressional news, more national politics. Taking a step back away from some international news, focusing on the U.S. here. So Democrats are laser focused on critical incident border patrol teams. Why is that? Let's find out, according to New York Times. So there are, quote, critical incident teams within the U.S. Border Patrol that have drawn the scrutiny of congressional Democrats. Lawmakers want information about the mission of the units and the scope of their authority, and the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection have refused to provide it. So on Monday, 10 committees and subcommittee chairs in both the House and Senate have asked the Government Accountability Office to look into these teams. The House Committees on Homeland Security and Oversight and Reform also announced their own investigation into the units. The new Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Chris Magnus, assumed his position with a long to-do list. Leading that list is oversight of the Border Patrol and its entrenched insular culture. Magnus has promised to bring transparency to the agency. The respective leaders of the House committees asked Magnus to provide documents by February 7th. The rise in deaths from high-speed vehicle chases by the Border Patrol prompted the scrutiny. The Times reported that this month that the local police reported on these fatal crashes noted the presence of critical incident teams at some of these scenes. However, Customs and Border Protection have never mentioned the teams in news releases about high-speed chases or use of force incidents, and they are not mentioned in any current policies that the agency has made public. Now, going back to 2013, the teams were mentioned in the agency's use of force policy, but the reference was deleted from subsequent versions after an outside consulting group raised questions about what the teams did. Fishy, fishy. It's almost like CPB's got a culture problem. I wonder why. Now, CPB has defended the teams, saying that they collect evidence and assist with investigations by the agency's Office of Professional Responsibility into employee misconduct. Now, the own agency is investigating itself. This is always a problem. It doesn't matter what happens. We've investigated ourselves and found that we have done nothing wrong. Now, this isn't to say like the government can't be involved in its own investigation of itself, but it means that if you're going to have these kind of investigations, they need to be conducted by an agency that isn't directly tied to the one that's being investigated. So in other words, like I said, like the agency investigates itself, results of those investigations are kept private. Now, quote, public trust and support depends on investigators' integrity. Andrea Guerrero, the leader of the community group in San Diego, said Monday. Last year, the group called on Congress to investigate the teams. Ms. Guerrero learned last year about a 2010 case involving the death of a 42-year-old Mexican man who was hogtied, beaten, and shocked with a taser by Border Patrol agents after he was caught entering the country illegally. The 2010 episode drew international attention, and the case is being heard this year, wow, by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights Court, an apparent first for a person who died in the hands of U.S. law enforcement. So we will be sure to cover this story more as things develop, so pay attention to this program here for more information as it becomes available. Now, we've talked about on this program a lot about stock trading in Congress. Maybe it shouldn't happen, maybe there needs to be rules, etc. So we have a quick follow-up to that, and this is compiled from reporting from both Yahoo Finance and CNBC. Now, Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat of Arizona, joined Democrat Senator Jon Ossoff's legislation to end stock trading by members of Congress and senior staff. While this bill is just one of several under consideration, it is also the strictest. The quote, the Banned Congressional Stock Trading Act would confiscate a lawmaker's entire salary if they break the rules. In an interview with Yahoo Finance this week, the Arizona senator said the issue of stock trading, to his mind, is one part of being, quote, more transparent with the American people. We see a lot of information that the general public does not have access to, Kelly says, and it is not right for individuals to be elected to Congress and then be able to trade on that information. True, it's insider trading. Senator Mark Kelly has the distinction of being the only member of Congress who publishes his Senate schedule online, doesn't take a dime of PAC money, and has all of his assets in qualified blind trust. Now, a qualified blind trust means that the assets and it's being privately managed by an outside group without the knowledge of its owner. This means that they can't trade information back and forth. And if they do so, it's violating the agreements of the trust and federal law. Now, according to NBC News affiliates WCNC, there are 25 Democrats and 2 Republicans who are calling for leadership to swiftly ban members from owning or trading stocks while in office. Speaker of House Nancy Pelosi initially defended the practice, saying that members should be allowed to participate in America's free market system. After significant backlash for the position, she moderated her stance somewhat, suggesting that the penalties for violating the Stock Act could be higher. More Republicans in the House, at least, may soon jump on the practice bandwagon as a campaign issue in the re-election this November. Cheap shots at the Democrats for not doing it right. Easy wins. Democrats in both houses of Congress were the first to respond to the Business Insider investigation, with Ossoff out in front for the Senate. Republican leaders met with GOP donors last week to discuss using the issue in their midterm election campaigns. It's likely the GOP will use the controversy surrounding the stock trades of Nancy Pelosi's husband and her initial reluctance to stop the practice. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Oh, okay. Well, let me respond to this comment that I just saw. So this is a comment that we got in. I don't know if I just missed it too long ago or what. So we got this comment in. All right. Oh, hey, why are you adding? Is this it? Nope. Hey, now, where is it? Call to action. Donate button, Discord. Hey, oh, highlights. Yeah, it should be right here. Okay. And clear all. Huh. Clear all. Get overlay link. Okay. Hold on a second. I want to get this on screen, and it's not working for some reason. Of course, it didn't. I am annoyed. All right, there we go. So for whatever reason, it didn't work, and it's not working again. Okay, whatever. So Doug R from YouTube said that high-speed crashes wouldn't happen if illegal aliens weren't fleeing law enforcement. Well, high-speed crashes wouldn't really exist if law enforcement didn't conduct high-speed chases. High-speed chases are entirely dangerous and entirely avoidable by following the suspect with either aerial or even back behind the person, not going at such high speeds, and interdicting them from crossing traffic. That is actually the easiest way to capture somebody is to interdict them, not to chase them down until they eventually crash and kill other people. So it is just a bad practice. Say what you want about, as you said, illegal aliens or criminals or people engaged in fleeing from law enforcement. It's just not a good practice. It puts everyone's lives in danger, and the police aren't making it better by engaging in them. So there is not a danger to other people from a person simply fleeing an officer, not inherently. We need to interdict them, but engaging in other risky behavior that increases the risk of accidents doesn't make things better. It's the same thing of like shooting at a fleeing car. How does that help anybody? Oh, right. Hey, I'm glad I broke through. Fair enough, he says. I'm going to throw that on the guest chat real quick. There you go. See, fair enough. Appreciate it, Doug R. I like having reasonable conversations. And Mark Markson had subscribed. Thank you for the subscription. My stuff isn't working very well today. I'll have to investigate it, but appreciate it. All right. So continuing on with the news. Now, we have this thing called Chips for America Act, and we're going to talk about it. And in this report, we're compiling information from Business Insider, Executive Gov, and a White House fact sheet. So now this is coming out of the Biden administration. President Biden announced last week that Intel, the country's leading maker of semiconductors amidst a global chip shortage, will commit $20 billion to build a manufacturing megasite in New Albany on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Intel will build at least 2 semiconductor fabrication plants on the 1,000-acre site. The facility will be used for research, development, and manufacture of its most cutting-edge computer chips, and will employ at least 7,000 construction workers, and the facility will employ at least 300 people. Construction will begin this year, and the plant should be operational by 2025. The Associated Press describes Intel's announcement as the largest private sector investment in Ohio's history. The president also mentioned that the semiconductor companies, including Samsung, Texas Instruments, and Micron, announced $80 billion in investments in 2021 to build new manufacturing facilities within the United States. The Biden administration is committed to expanding the country's ability to manufacture its own semiconductors. Biden has called on Congress to pass a bill that would promote research and development and expand manufacturing for semiconductors and other critical supply chains. The proposed U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, which was passed by the Senate last June, would authorize full funding for the Chips for America. The measure includes, quote, $52 billion incentives for more companies to build their manufacturing facilities here in the United States of America, Biden said. There is bipartisan support for this bill. We'll keep you updated on this. Now, oh, okay, yes, I remember you, Doug. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Appreciate it, buddy. So now one thing that needs to be mentioned about this particular this investment, it won't be done until 2025. So don't expect this to have any noticeable impact on the supply of chips. And chips are literally everything, and that's partly why we're seeing a supply chain shortage, supply chain issues, and supply shortage of all consumer electronics. What this will do, though, is in the future provide America with more jobs, more stability in the manufacture of chips and the acquisition thereof, and add to the entire global supply of chips. And also increase security by having them built in the United States, where they can't be messed with nefarious groups such as China. So it needs to be mentioned that that's the case. So don't expect the graphic cards to come down in price anytime soon. That's all I'm saying. All right. Give me 1 second to get a drink of water. I wish I knew why my program wasn't working. Maybe oh, it's not on? I wonder why it's not on. Read or I'll figure it out later. All right, so let's continue on with the news roundup. So we have some important SCOTUS news coming at you. Justice Breyer is retiring. The following is compiled from reporting by NBC News. The biggest SCOTUS news this week is Justice Stephen Breyer's announcement that he will retire at the end of this term, leaving a vacancy for President Biden to fill this October 3rd. Breyer, 83 years old, is one of 3 remaining liberal justices on the High Court. Let's hear him speak in his own words.
Believe me, I hold it right here. It's wonderful. And I thought about what I might say. Something I enjoy is talking to high school students, grammar school students, college students, even law school students. And they'll come around and ask me, what is it you find particularly meaningful about your job? What sort of gives you a thrill? And that's not such a tough question for me to answer. It's the same thing. Day one, almost, up to day I don't know how many. But what I say to them is, look, I sit there on the bench, and after we hear lots of cases, and after a while, the impression, it takes a while, I have to admit, but the impression you get is, as you well know, this is a complicated country. There are more than 330 million people, and my mother used to say it's every race, it's every religion, and she would emphasize this, and it's every point of view possible. And
this is very true. The United States is actually one of the most ideologically diverse countries because of its kind of unique history, being a nation of immigrants. And the ability for religions to just pop up everywhere. So managing that is not managing it. I should say more like navigating that is fraught, especially for Supreme Court justices. Now, one of the things that's important to note about Breyer is that he never really liked being called a liberal. He considered himself more of a centrist and a consensus maker. And one of the things that, and he might talk about this here because I didn't get a chance to watch this, is that he wanted to make more consensus, get more 9-0 decisions, or maybe 7-2 decisions, what have you, right? An overwhelming majority comprised both of right and left justices in order to make the decisions more long lasting. And he's probably disappointed because that didn't happen as much as he would like. And we might, like I said, we might hear about that a little bit, but I wanted to bring that up just in case it's not mentioned. Let's continue.
It's a kind of miracle when you sit there and see all those people in front of you, people that are so different in what they think, and yet they've decided to help solve their major differences under law. And when the students get too cynical, I say, go look at what happens in countries that don't do that. And that's there. I can't take this around in my job. People have come to accept this Constitution, and they've come to accept the importance of a rule of law. And I want to make another point to them. I want to say
it's true, but populism is starting to rise both on the right and the left. And populists don't really care about the rule of law. Should mention that just a little bit.
Look, of course people don't agree. But we have a country that is based on human rights, democracy, and so forth. But I'll tell you what Lincoln thought, what Washington thought, and what people today still think. It's an experiment. It's an experiment. That's what they said. And Joanna paid each of our grandchildren a certain amount of money to memorize the Gettysburg Address. And the reason that what we want them to pick up there, and what I want those students to pick up, if I can remember the first 2 lines, is that 7 years ago, our fathers created upon this here a new country, a country that was dedicated to liberty and the proposition that all men are created equal. Conceived in liberty, those are his words, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He meant women too. And we are now engaged in a great civil war to determine whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. See, those are the words I want. To see an experiment. And that's what he thought. It's an experiment. And I found some letters that George Washington wrote where he said the same thing. It's an experiment.
Yeah, this is the idea that the founders had, and very necessary. The amount of change the country has gone under, at least constitutionally, is probably less than what the founders actually envisioned. I think it was Jefferson that said that he anticipated that the Constitution might be rewritten wholesale every 10 or 20 years. And the staying power of the Constitution as it was written, with only, 26 amendments, is actually a testament to how well that the system was built. But we are, at least in my opinion, currently under strain with the amount of things that we can actually do under our current system. And we're seeing that some of the norms that were at play that prevented a lot of issues are actually starting to erode. And I just realized I don't have my line on. No. But so that's one thing that I'm a little worried about. And I think we could use some constitutional amendments to actually fix that. And I'm willing to talk about that with anybody that wants to talk about it. There's some things that I think that could be done. I do think the Senate needs to be fundamentally reformed in some way. And that could be as simple right now as a first step, getting rid of the filibuster, or changing it and making that change permanent, that where it can't be changed again to make it the broken thing that it is today. So yeah, I think that that's some of the things that we are seeing. And Doug, appreciate your feedback. Really do.
That experiment existed then because even the liberals in Europe, they're looking over here and they're saying it's a great idea in principle, but it'll never work. But we'll show them it does. That's what Washington thought. And that's what Lincoln thought. And that's what people still think today. And I say, well, I want you, and I'm talking to the students now. I say, I want you to pick just this up. It's an experiment that's still going on.
Correct.
And I'll tell you
True.
something.
Very true.
You know who will see whether that experiment works? It's you, my friend. It's you, Mr. High School student. It's you, Mr. College student. It's you, Mr. Law School students. It's us, but it's you. It's that next generation.
And if you haven't noticed, he's very flowery with his language. And one of the things that he actually does on a regular basis is write books. And that's one of his passions, and that's an aside kind of thing of why that he kind of has the mannerisms he does. And maybe one of the reasons why he's retiring. But I'll talk about why I think that might be the case after we're done with this. And I talk about the news a bit more.
And the one after that, my grandchildren and their children, they'll determine whether the experiment still works. And of course, I am an optimist, and I'm pretty sure it will. Does it surprise you that that's the thought that comes into my mind today?
Not at all. Not at all.
But thank you.
Thank you, Justice Breyer. All right. So let's go ahead and continue on with the news and talk a little bit about what Biden might be doing to replace him. So Biden has confirmed his campaign commitment to nominate a black woman to the Scotus bench. Biden's Scotus nominee will be another in a long line of diversity that Biden appointments represent, both in the judiciary and in his cabinet. Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, said Biden's nominee will receive a prompt hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee and will be considered and confirmed by the full United States Senate with all the deliberate speed. Americans owe Justice Breyer an enormous debt of gratitude, Schumer added. The media has suggested there will be a battle in the Senate over the confirmation of Biden's pick. However, the Senate changed the rules under then Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to allow for a party line vote in confirming Justice Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, as well as all other appointments to the federal judiciary. The rule change still stands. Now, it's important to mention this rule change. So what the rule change is what the Senate had previously considered to be the nuclear option. And that was making a carve out for a simple up and down vote, simple majority vote, to confirm justices to the court. And it was under Republican leadership that they did this, because when Republicans were in the majority under Obama, they stonewalled Merrick Garland from getting the Supreme Court seat that he rightly deserved. And Merrick Garland was picked specifically by Obama because I believe it was then Senator Grassley of the Senate Judiciary Committee, acting head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, or the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who said that when asked by a reporter, who do you think would be an okay pick that would get through the Senate? And he specifically said Merrick Garland. But Mitch McConnell wasn't having that. And so for a year, Merrick Garland was prevented from getting, and successfully so, from being appointed to the Supreme Court. So when Democrats, when they were in not the majority, but had the minority and could filibuster, and rightly so, being pissed off that they lost their seat, chose to filibuster, it was Kavanaugh, or was it Gorsuch? I think it was Kavanaugh. Chose to filibuster Kavanaugh due to the allegations of sexual assault that happened when he was a young man, that they quickly did away with the filibuster and confirmed him. And yeah, so that's where we are now. I don't think these games should be allowed at all. I think that there shouldn't be ever an instance where a Supreme Court justice seat is left vacant for more than 3 months. If the Senate doesn't confirm a justice within 3 months, well, there's a pocket. You get the whole pocket pick, or you get a temporary justice that exists in that seat until the end of the president's term, or one is confirmed by the full Senate. I think that is necessary to prevent, especially with a divided court, prevent division and actually make more towards compromise. Because if they know that the president is going to get a pick regardless of what happens, then they should get it. And this is necessary because if the party in the majority in the Senate is different from the party the president controls, say, I don't know, 2022, right? Say that happens and Mitch McConnell takes back authority. There's a ton of stuff that he can do to prevent even the hearing from happening, which is what happened for Merrick Garland. I don't think that should be allowed. I think that breaks democracy. That breaks a norm that was holding everything together for that. Now, to talk a little bit about why I think Justice Breyer actually chose to retire. He was adamant last year about not retiring until he was ready, right? And there was pressure mounting from advisors and other people to let me turn that off. On other people to actually go through and retire. The most recent Supreme Court case that was heard, I personally noticed that he was very put off by some of the arguments made by his contemporaries on the conservative side when it came to the vaccine mandate. It sounded like he was like, you're questioning. It wasn't like you're questioning science. It was like, no, this is like wrong information. Like, are you saying that we can't do anything as a government to prevent people from doing things? And this were in response not just to the employer or the employee mandate that happened, mandate, quote unquote, but also the one that targeted healthcare workers. Now, the healthcare worker one made it through, but the Alito, Clarence Thomas, Amy Coney Barrett, I believe it was Amy. Let me double check that really quick. 5-4 decision on vaccine healthcare workers. Court blocks out. Supreme Court blocks. Green light. What was the decision? Who was the decision? Yeah, 5-4. Request to allow temporary enforced vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. Oral arguments issued. Yeah, it was Amy Coney Barrett was also in against it, so it was a 5-4 decision. And I think that actually is what pushed him over the edge. To be honest with you, I don't have much to go on this other than what the arguments that were being made and his responses. And you can fact check me on this, right? You can go look at it yourself, say, hey, I got a completely different opinion about what this was. Maybe he's just time to retire. He's old. He's not a spry young man anymore, right? He's old. But I think that was what pushed him over the edge, to be honest with you. And now let's talk about, so I think that's why he retired. Now let's talk about a little bit about Biden saying he will nominate a black woman. So I had a really long conversation with a friend of mine about this, another streamer about this. And we both agreed that Biden should have just, well, I think we both agreed that Biden should have just did it rather than announce it. However, while running for president, the activist base along the Democratic Party was not dominated, but had a lot of groundswell among black women and women in general. And the issue with race was plaguing Biden due to the crime bill, due to some of his past opinions about like busing, due to was it Bert? No, Thurman, Strom Thurmond, I think it was. His eulogizing him and stuff like that. Stuff that happened not too far in the past, but in the past. And it dogged him. It dogged him really bad. So one of the ways that he was able to assure people that he wouldn't be this like racist old man that people were trying to paint him out to be was to promise that, hey, if there's a justice to come up, I will pick a black woman as this justice. I want a black woman as my vice president, etc. And this was ways to navigate the activist wing of the Democratic Party to basically seal the deal and make people more likely to support him than not. And it took a lot of fire off of him in that way. Now we can debate whether or not this is a positive thing on the general cultural side of the stuff. On the general culture side of the stuff. But I do think that this worked for him among Democrats. And like I said, I personally wish he would have just did it. Like, your actions speak louder than your words, and people like pundits on the right, like the far right wing pundits, were going to say, oh, he only picked her because she was black anyways, regardless of what he said. But now that he said it, they can actually be like, oh, look, he said it. So that's what's happening. No other qualifications matter. It's just that she's black. That's the only thing that matters. Fuck qualifications. Even though that's not what's happening, right? Because the qualifications are the default. You never pick somebody that's unqualified unless, I don't know, kind of Republican, I guess. I don't know. There's been a lot of, not just Republicans do this, but Democrats have done this too, but with the lower benches, with the federal justice. And for example, like I think Amy Coney Barrett never argued a case. Actually, I think that's true. Amy wasn't an attorney. Let me look that up really quick. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Amy Barrett. I don't care about above the law. Yeah. So according to Mother Jones, she was one of the least qualified, least experienced for the court in 30 years. Attorney. And another person was, Kagan had this kind of, but she was picked as Solicitor General and argued cases in front of the Supreme Court before being nominated to Supreme Court. She was also in academia. But I believe this is true, that Amy Coney Barrett was not a practicing lawyer. She was an academic and taught law, which is important. I think this is not a qualification. It's just not as much of a qualification as somebody that practiced law necessarily. So I think that's true. Okay. So that's what we're seeing here. And I don't really like it, but it is what it is, and there's nothing that we can really do about it. So we have to deal with it at this point. All right. So we got another thing that I want to share with y'all. So one of the things that we're seeing here is that the Scotus is going to take up a case that targets affirmative action. So what we're going to watch here is a TikTok video from Scotus blog. Scotus blog is phenomenal if you're a court watcher at all. And the fact that they're putting out TikToks just means that TikTok just is something that I have to get now. But it's going to be a succinct review about what's happening here. So that's what we're going to watch it. Let me go ahead. Oop, wrong F11. Here we go.
Supreme Court is going to decide if affirmative action is constitutional and permissible under federal civil rights law. In 2003, the court upheld race-conscious admissions when it said the University of Michigan could consider race as a part of its efforts to assemble a diverse student body. Today, they agreed to reconsider the issue in 2 cases, one involving Harvard, the other University of North Carolina. Students in the Harvard case argued that their race-conscious admissions policy discriminates against Asian American applicants. According to the group, Asian American applicants are significantly less likely to be admitted than similarly qualified white, Black, or Hispanic applicants. Students in the UNC case argued their race-conscious admissions policy
Hold on a second. I'm going to rewind that a little bit. I think there we go. So I want to talk about the Asian American incident in Harvard. It is a legitimate concern. Full stop. Legitimate concern. I don't think it's necessarily because of affirmative action, but if the issue exists. So if you look at grades, test scores, as the overwhelming majority of the thing that should get a person into an Ivy League school, Asian Americans are being discriminated against within Harvard. It is systemic racism. The reason behind that, I think, is a bit more complicated than just being like, well, they're letting in Black people or brown people that are less qualified, quote unquote. And the reason I say that is because when I was initially exposed to this story, and this story has been on the news for a long time, at least, patterns here and there, like the Atlantic covered it, National Review covered it, Politico covered it. A lot of organizations have covered this. And one of the things that was stated that a person said that they had heard during an admission forum, not debate, but like conference, was basically something along the lines of, oh, great, we have another Asian person that practices the violin, got great grades, great SAT score. We don't need another one of those. And that's shit. That's absolutely shit. That should not enter a person's mind at all. But I don't think it's as simple as just being they're discriminating against Asians in order to let Black and brown people in. I think that's a right-wing narrative for that in order to try to siphon away Asian American voters from the Democratic Party. I think that's what's happening here. It is legitimate that this thing is happening. So it needs to be investigated. I just don't think it's because of affirmative action. I think it's because of what I just said. I think it's more along the lines of, oh, great, like another one, cool, and that sort of thing. I'm not going to defend it. I can't defend it. There's nothing to defend. I just don't think, like I said, I don't think it's because of affirmative action. It could easily be remedied by getting rid of legacy admissions. For example, it could easily be remedied by reducing the number of academic scholarships or academic placements or special placements and that sort of thing. But it is a concern. It is something that we should pay attention to. It is a real thing. So if you're going to argue against this, don't say it's just not real, because you don't know what you're talking about. Let's continue with the rest of the video.
Or Hispanic applicants. Students in the UNC case argued their race-conscious admissions policy violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Constitution. Unlike Harvard, UNC is a public university and is therefore covered by the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection of the laws. The court will likely hear the case next term, so we're not likely to get a decision until later this year or early next year. Supreme Court.
All right, so that's what's going on with Scotus on this. Let's talk a little bit more about it. So this will be the first time that this court has heard cases involving affirmative action since the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy and the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Given the 6-3 conservative majority of the court, the decision to take up these cases is widely seen as a potential end to affirmative action in higher education. The reason being is that Kennedy, because the court is supposed to practice stare decisis, and it doesn't seem like they are in this case. So there is concern that the court may decide to end the use of racial classifications in admissions altogether. Chief Justice John Roberts has been among the most outspoken critics of affirmative actions, famously declaring in a 2006 opinion that, quote, "it is a sordid business, this divvying us up by race." He and many of the court's other conservatives have long argued that the best way to root out discrimination on the basis of race is to not permit discrimination on the basis of race. Affirmative action has repeatedly been administered last rites during the last 5 decades, said Justin Driver, a law professor at Yale. But these 2 cases unmistakably pose the gravest threats yet to affirmative action's continued vitality. The possibility of a ruling that would either restrict or prohibit race as a consideration in admissions could fundamentally reshape college admissions in the years to come. Such a ruling would likely reduce the number of Black and Latino students at nearly every selective college and graduate school, with more Asian Americans and white students gaining admissions instead. And this is a thing that has played out in the past. When the University of California's system, I think it was Caltech, Berkeley, might be the whole system, so don't quote me on this. I'm 90% sure it's the whole system. They eliminated affirmative action. They tried to put it back in recently, voted down by voters. The number of Asian American students or Asian students that attended these highly sought after, top-notch schools has increased dramatically. It went from something like around 15% or so to like 33%. And the number of the numbers of other racial groups has diminished as well. What I personally believe that should happen, and this is probably going to be putting my foot in my mouth here a little bit, but what I personally believe should happen is that race should be like one of those like little extra check boxes. It shouldn't be like an overarching thing, and I think that's the way most schools do it. The University of Texas system does this. And there's other public institutions that do this as well. But I think what we should do is actually define the merit that we're seeking in a college student. And that merit can include things that would disproportionately benefit people of color. For example, you could have an adversity score that adds additional points to your college admissions. Let's game this out a little bit, okay? So, and this would help poor white people too. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a race thing. It would be a class thing, more sense. So let's say, for example, you are a person. Let's compare 2 people, right? And the difference between these 2 people is that one has, let's say, a 1400 SAT score and a 3.8 GPA, right? They have some extracurriculars, and that's it, right? Pretty well-rounded student. Extracurriculars, great GPA, good SAT score. We have a second student. And this person is middle class or rich, right? Second person has a lower SAT score and lower GPA. They have a 1250 SAT score. They have a 3.6 GPA, or let's even make it lower, 3.4 GPA. However, this person works a part-time job, pulling in 30 hours a week to support themselves and their family. They also volunteer at their soup kitchen, and they do other things as well, right? Which one actually has more merit? That's not easy to answer. And that's the kind of things that we need to actually do when we're doing college admissions to prestigious schools, to highly competitive schools, at least in my opinion. But let me know what your thoughts are. It's that time again, guys. Go ahead and tweet me at Crowdsourced Poll at Twitter. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. One of the easiest way. And you can see all the memes that I share. Also, join the Discord. Discord is another easy place to join us at. And we are going to have contests and other things like that. And it will be a good time. We gave out a pinatagram for the people that made the best memes found the best memes over a 6-month period. We also had another contest for the 2020 election for the person that got the closest without going over in the number of delegates and states won by President Biden. And what we gave out there was a frosted beer mug. So these are the kind of things that we like to do at Crowdsourced Politics, build this little community up, have some fun. So if those are things you like to do, follow us on those sites, as well as our Facebook group, which is Facebook.com/groups/Tribune Commons. All right, let's continue on. Oh, no, before that, hold on. We are also in the works of creating another podcast. And this one is what I think is to be an interesting podcast, an interesting concept. We are calling it Praxis Run. And the goal of Praxis Run is to help people across the political spectrum understand activists from across the political spectrum and also understand how best to put their politics into action. What are we hoping to do with this? Besides that, well, we're also hoping to inform and tamp down on vitriol across the political spectrum. So what does that mean? That means is that we plan on interviewing pro-life activists, pro-choice activists, people that are highly religious, people that are not religious at all, and also maybe a Satanist versus a evangelical Christian. Not on the same thing, but how these people go about putting their morality into practice. So climate change would be one of the things that we talk about, etc. And so if you're interested in that, stay tuned for more. But let's continue on with the news. So as you know, we are doing a segment on the January 6th investigation. This is part 2 of that segment. In our segment on the January 6th insurrection 2 weeks ago, we reported on the makeup and work of the Select Committee, updated you on the state of the Justice Department's investigation, and brought you the news that 11 defendants, including the leader of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, were charged with seditious conspiracy. Tonight, we'll begin to lay the foundations for a different conspiracy, the one engineered by the former president, members of the administration, and Republican members of Congress, and many of their allies. The following is compiled from reporting by Rolling Stone, The Guardian, and CNN. Reporting has revealed that the effort to overturn the 2020 election began within the administration in the days and weeks between Election Day and Inauguration Day. In the run-up to December 14th of 2020, the certification date for each state, the former president worked to convince battleground states to refuse to certify the results for Joe Biden. Rudy Giuliani and his allies coordinated the nuts and bolts of this process on a state-by-state level, according to CNN sources. One source said that there were multiple planning meetings between Trump's campaign officials and the GOP state operatives. The source said that the campaign lined up supporters to fill, quote, alternative electors slots, and it secured meeting rooms in state houses for the fake electors to meet on December 14th of 2020. Now, to clarify what this is, only the electors in the vast majority of states, only electors that are from the person that won the popular vote are able to be called electors. These would be the other side of that. So they wouldn't be the official electors, but they would be part of that committee. So it's not like they just came out of nowhere, just to be clear. All right. But let's continue on. It was Trump's hope that Republican legislatures from 7 battleground states would replace Biden's authentic electors with the rogue GOP slate. Meanwhile, his campaign officials launched a parallel effort to disrupt and undermine the Electoral College process, with Giuliani also coordinating that effort. This included flooding the media with false claims of fraud while quietly exploring the fast diminishing avenues to overturn the results. Trump ultimately failed to stop the certification, though. Focus then turned on stopping the January 6th certification. Enter Peter Navarro, who was director of Trump's trade council and a major voice for pushing the big lie. Navarro's so proud of his part in this effort to overturn the 2020 election, he told several news media outlets all about it in the first few weeks. He was on a press tour to promote his new memoir, in which he lays out the specifics of the plan to keep Trump in office. The plot was dubbed the Green Bay Sweep. Yeah, they can't stop from bragging. That's how bad it is. For the 2021 Green Bay Sweep, Navarro writes that Steve Bannon played the role of Lombardi. The plan was to have members of the House and Senate raise challenges to the counts of Electoral College votes from pivotal battleground states during the final certification of the votes of January 6th. The political and legal beauty of the strategy, Navarro writes, is that the challenges would force up to 2 hours of debate per state in each chamber of Congress. That would add up to as much as 24 hours of a nationally televised hearing, Navarro writes. The hearing would enable Republicans to broadcast their big lie that Democrats had stolen the election directly to the American people. Now, another thing that this would do, it would make people think more so that the election is actually in question. So the immediate goal was not to get the election overturned on January 6th. Instead, they aimed to create such a spectacle that Pence would be forced to exercise its authority as president of the Senate to put certification of the elections on ice for at least another several weeks, while Congress and the state legislatures pursued the fraud allegations. The problem with the plot was that its success hinged on quarterback Mike, and Pence wasn't solidly on board. Navarro writes that he tried, with Trump's backing, to brief Pence on this claim of election irregularities, but that Pence was kept off limits by his chief of staff, Mark Short. Navarro told the Daily Beast that Trump was on board with the strategy, which he writes also had the backing of more than 100 members of Congress. Navarro's elaborated that. Sorry, hold on a second. Pick that up on the mic. So Navarro elaborated that the plan started off perfectly as Congress opened the proceedings to count electoral college votes. Representative Paul Gosar objected to results from his home state of Arizona, seconded by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, an action that received standing applause from GOP colleagues in the chamber. Had the count not then been interrupted by rioters, the 100 plus Republican members of Congress would have each made their objection. Wow. Okay, maybe it isn't me. I think you might have missed it. This is coming from Navarro's own book. This isn't coming from like news directly. It's not like a conspiracy theory. It's a person saying, hey, this is what we intended to do, and here's how we would have done it had shit worked out. My God. So had Trump not gotten his supporters into a fervor, we might have seen a different result. Wow. Isn't that very Trumpian? All right, let's continue. The parameters of the conspiracy to overturn this election were revealed in the last 2 weeks. We learned yesterday that the Justice Department has now begun an investigation into what U.S. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco called the fraudulent elector certifications. She said that the department had received referrals on the matter and, quote, our prosecutors are looking into those. Monaco added, we are going to follow the facts and the law wherever they lead to address conduct of any kind at any level that is part of an assault on our democracy. Fake slates of Trump electors were sent to Congress from several states, in fact, won by Joe Biden. These states include Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, New Mexico, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Of those, 2, New Mexico and Pennsylvania, added a caveat that the Trump electors should only be counted in the event of a disputed election. The other 5 states sent signed statements to Washington giving the appearance that Trump had won despite clear and verified counts placing Biden on top. The certificate from Georgia, one of the most hotly contested states in the 2020, reads, quote, we, the undersigned, being the duly elected and qualified electors for President and Vice President of the United States of America from the state of Georgia, ... The fake statement then carries the names and signatures of 16 fake electors who claim to have cast their electoral college votes for Trump when they had no legal standing to do so. The move was in direct contravention to the actual vote in Georgia, confirmed in multiple counts, which Biden won by 11,779 votes. Remember, Trump was asking for just one more vote being fined from Georgia. Democrat Attorney General in New Mexico and Michigan have now asked federal prosecutors to examine whether drawing up the bogus certificates amounted to a crime. The referrals appear to have triggered the DOJ's investigation. And after reporting earlier this month pointed to Rudy Giuliani's integral role in the planning of these efforts, the Select Committee sent him a subpoena specifically referring to the efforts investigating the ploy. Let's see what we got from here. All right. The letter was never officially sent after the acting U.S. Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, refused to play ball. The fake... Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Let's investigate the ploy. Another area of interest is the draft letter prepared in December of 2020 by Jeffrey Clark, who tried to persuade Georgia and 6 other states won by Biden to call back their electors from Congress and consider replacing them with Trump electors. The letter was never officially sent after the acting U.S. Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, refused to play ball. Remember, Jeffrey Rosen is acting Attorney General because Attorney General, oh God, who was it? Oh man, Bill Barr? Yeah, Barr, right? Yeah, William Barr, Bill Barr. William Barr, sorry about that, said, I'm outie. Now, the fake electors tactic was also central to the election subversion strategy laid out for Trump by the conservative lawyer John Eastman. In the now notorious two-page memo handed to Trump and then Vice President Mike Pence in the Oval Office, Eastman argued that Pence could block the certification of Biden's victory on January 6. The fact that Republicans left a paper trail by sending their phony certificates to both Congress and the National Archives suggests that they may now face legal peril. The House Select Committee has also recently begun to focus on the fake Trump electors and particularly those who organized the plot. Be sure to tune into this program again in 2 weeks, and we will have additional updates about the January 6th investigations going forward. Now, we're going to talk about a bit of state politics. So what's new this week in Florida? Where to begin? How about legislation making it illegal to make white people uncomfortable? It's not a joke. It's actually happening. So this Tuesday, a bill backed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis that would prohibit public schools and private businesses from inflicting discomfort on white people during lessons of training about discrimination was approved by the state's Senate Education Committee, its first hurdle before becoming a law. The bill, SB 148, seemingly grew out of the conservative hysteria over critical race theory, which is what's being called these programs that are diversity trainings. The bill reads in part, quote, an individual by virtue of his or her race or sex does not bear responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the race or sex. Individuals should not be made to feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any form of psychological distress on account of his or her race. DeSantis invoked Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., saying MLK would be these kinds of Republican laws. You think about what MLK stood for. He said he didn't want people judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character, DeSantis has said. Now, one of the things that we should mention about this is it's a famous quote from Martin Luther King. It's a very important quote. It's a quote that should be the norm. All right. It's not the norm. And it won't be the norm necessarily until we actually address systemic racism and past racial things that still impact today. So people would be like, well, Martin Luther King wouldn't be for affirmative action. He would be, or at least some version of it. So Martin Luther King is not this kind of person that is like a black and white thinker, for lack of a better term. And it should be noted that he was very, very left leaning and got more left leaning as he continued on his crusade for justice for all Americans. So that should be noted. Now, it shouldn't be like things that should be against the law. It should be like, maybe not against the law, but, very looked down upon or investigated for hate speech or whatever. It should be like, fucking these people and their bullshit. Like, you're just like whatever, colonizer or whatever the fuck you want to do it. Like, right. Those things are racial animus directed at white people. And those things are not cool. They're counterproductive. They're racist, etc. But this particular law, as it is written, at least in the quotes that we have shared so far, is very vague. And it could be that if we talk about, like, I don't know, Civil War stuff or how some people used to own people and people might feel a certain way because they're like their family or what have you. Or like, well, I never did that. Well, no one said that you did, but that's how people's minds go, that they would be up for lawsuits. So that's why these vague language laws are bad. Now let's talk more about this. So according to The Independent, a bill under consideration by Republican state legislatures that would mandate school teachers to teach. Okay. So that is what's going on with this law. Now there's another law that is also coming out of Florida that would require teachers to wear microphones as they teach and be videotaped in the classroom. According to The Independent, A bill under consideration by Republican state legislatures would mandate school teachers to wear a microphone in class. The purpose? So that parents can monitor what their children are being taught. The sponsor of the bill, Florida State Representative Bob Rummel, says his personal belief is that teachers can be monitored constantly without any infringement on privacy, CBS News reports. Quote, I think if we can do it in a safe way to protect the privacy of students and teachers, I think we should do it, Rob Rummel claimed. I haven't heard a response good or bad from any teachers, but it's not their private space. It's our children's spaces too. Anna Fusco, Anna Fusco, the Bauer Teachers Union president, said the bill could discourage some people from entering the profession for fears of being called out and criticized publicly by parents. You want to play a big brother every moment. You want to play big brother every moment? That's not how society should be. We need to get back to where we have trust, we have value, we have faith, we have conversations, and we can work things out if something happens. She adds that it isn't necessary to video monitor educators at work. As the Broward County Public Schools website states, under Florida state law, some parents are already able to request that a camera be put in the classroom. It's not in every classroom, but not every parent has exercised that right. We have parents that don't want it. It's kind of twofold. If one parent wants it, the camera goes in the room. If the other 10 parents don't want it, they don't have a say, Ms. Fusco said. So this is already a problem. It's like, I get it. I get it from just a practical standpoint that you think that, hey, sunshine's the best disinfectant. If we monitor everything that goes on in a classroom, we'll be better. It will have a disquieting effect on like free speech, and kids being comfortable talking to their teachers about things. It could also have the negative implications of students not wanting their parents to know that they're reporting abuse, etc. So this is stuff that these people aren't thinking about, at least in my opinion. I don't think they're thinking about it at all, because they want teachers to stop teaching things. Some of it goes all the way to history. Some of it's these, like I said, diversity training programs that are bad, right? It would be better, rather than putting in these things, to be explicit with the bad sort of trainings that might happen in a school. For example, the brown eye, green eye test that was done by, Jane Elliott. Yeah, that's might not be something that's suitable for kids. It was first used with kids to teach a very important lesson about race. And it didn't divide kids by race, it divided them by eye color, and they started forming in groups and out groups and acting out because they were being looked down upon and stuff like that. But that's not necessarily something we want to subject children to, right? We don't necessarily want to subject children to oppressed and oppressor categories and dividing them between white people and everybody else, right? This might reinforce things that we're trying to get away from. So the concerns by some people are legitimate, but we need to be specific about what those concerns are, not throw everything under the sun into CRT, which is what Republicans have done, which is what the activist conservatives have done, because it works for them to do so. It's a tool to get people to be against everything that comes out from like the 1619 Project, all the way to like, a book in high school geared towards children that has sex in it, right? Like high school geared towards high school students that has sex in it, and it's an amalgamation of all these things. And so, if you are concerned about quote unquote CRT, you should be pushing your legislature to be as specific as possible and not write these vague laws that allow people on the other side to just dismiss you out of hand. Take a little bit of advice from me. Take it for what it is. That's what I think. But let's continue on. There's other things that we have to talk about. So now there's this new Don't Say Gay legislation. We saved the worst for last here. Here's reporting from the Independent ABC News. Florida lawmakers are trying to pass a law that would limit classroom discussion about gender and sexuality. It would also give parents legal footing to sue schools or teachers who teach or discuss those topics. The two bills in the state legislature, HB 1557 and SB 1834, state that a school district, quote, may not encourage classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in primary grade levels or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. The House Education and Employment Committee has moved the bill forward, handing it off to the Judiciary Committee. LGBTQ plus advocates are calling this bill "Don't Say Gay" legislation and fear that it would suppress any discussion or teaching about LGBTQ history, oppression, or identity. Critics of the law fear that that by effectively banning discussion of gender and LGBTQ issues in the classroom, LGBTQ students will feel as though their identities or sexual orientations are shameful. Heather Wilkie of Central Florida LGBTQ advocacy group Zebra Coalition told ABC News that, quote, an effective learning environment was one where students could feel safe and healthy. When you have laws like this that directly attack our kids for who they are, it prevents them from learning. It prevents them from being able to be healthy. The bill is sponsored by Republican and State Representative Joe Harding, who said in a tweet he hopes that it will reinforce the fundamental right of parents to make decisions regarding upbringing and control of their children. Kasten Buttigieg, the husband of U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, was among the voices pushing back against the bill, claiming it would end with students' deaths. This will kill kids at Ron DeSantis, Florida. You are purposely making your state a harder place for LGBTQ kids to survive in, he wrote on Twitter. In a national survey of the Trevor Project, 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide last year. Now they can't even talk to teachers. The Human Rights Campaign reported that several states moved to pass laws restricting the rights of LGBTQ individuals, including Arizona, Alabama, Florida, Indiana, Kentucky, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, and South Dakota. Now, the Roundup will include a segment next week on the danger posed to public school children by these bills and other laws. They are insidious and they are everywhere, and they need to be prevented. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this, right? So there is this idea now. I don't know how long it's been an idea, but it's very much in prominence now, that the only thing that schools should do is teach writing, arithmetic, and maybe some history. And I say maybe some history because there's even disagreements about what should be taught there. Okay. There's also this idea that by saying these things exist, like gay people, racism, that you're reinforcing them and that you're converting kids to be gay. Like, that's straight up, that's what some of this thinking is. It's not true. It might be seen as acceptable, and you might feel a certain way about that, but is that really bad? Like, don't you want your child to feel comfortable talking to somebody about their confused feelings, even if they're not comfortable talking to you? Don't you want to lessen like bullying against people who might have different sexual orientation than others? Like, I don't know. This is one of those situations where I really can't think of any downside to just saying, yeah, gay people exist and they're valid. I don't see any downside whatsoever. I'm also not religious, but even if I was, I don't think that I would see a downside. I can't. Like, it's not, there's not one. But so that's what we're saying. That's what we're showing here. So, but hey, if you have news you want to see us cover on the Roundup, or if you'd like to join one of our panels, here's how to let us know again. You can hit me up on Twitter at Crowdsource Poll. All right. You can join the Discord community. Join us on Discord, which you can get the links above or below. And you can also join the Tribune Commons, which is www.facebook.com/groups/Tribune Commons, where you can find some not necessarily like-minded individuals talk about politics in ways that are a bit more measured than you might get elsewhere. So, but let's continue on with the news. So what is going on with the economy? Well, a lot is going on with the economy. Let's talk about what happened in 2021. So last year saw the fastest economic growth since Ronald Reagan was president. But for many people, 2021 felt less like morning in America and more like a restless night, dogged by fitful dreams about the ongoing pandemic. The Commerce Department reported today that the nation's gross domestic product grew 5.7% last year, the biggest increase since 1984. But the growth arrived in fits and starts, with hopes for a steady recovery repeatedly dashed by successive waves of infection. And now, uncertainty continues in the year ahead as the Omicron variant continues to spread. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is gearing up to raise interest rates, perhaps even aggressively, in an effort to combat stubbornly high inflation. Quote, "It wasn't a straight line for the economy last year, for sure," said Mark Zandi, chief economist for Moody's Analytics. The economy remains tethered to the pandemic. This is very true. China, in fact, is shutting down factories in areas still, trying to maintain a robust economic growth while also preventing death and despair from COVID. So they've shut down factories, and that's putting pauses on things. Continue on. Business last year boomed in the spring and early summer as millions of Americans got vaccinated and felt free to travel and dine out and more. In June and July alone, employers added more than 2 million jobs, nearly a third of the year's total job gain. But growth slowed when the Delta variant hit. The Commerce Department said that GDP grew at an annual rate of 6.9% in the last 3 months of the year, thanks in part to stronger exports and a buildup of inventories. But the fourth quarter wasn't uneven as the 9 months that came before it. Q4 started with a bang and ended with a whimper, said Zandi. While unemployment has dropped to just 3.9%, the lowest level since the start of the pandemic, employers only added 199,000 jobs in December, which, seasonally adjusted, is still a little bit lackluster. And forecasters expect that the weakness to continue into the beginning of the new year. Initial claims for unemployment benefits in recent weeks suggest some employers are cutting jobs in response to the Omicron wave. Even though last year's economic growth was the strongest in decades, it fell short of what economists once hoped for. Following passage of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, some forecasters were predicting growth as high as 7%, fueled by widespread vaccinations and pent-up demand. There were just too many people who didn't get vaccinated, Zandi said. It's admirable how well the economy did perform, despite the fact that vaccines didn't exactly solve the problem. Pandemic-driven supply chain problems and labor shortages weighed on economic growth while also driving up prices. The new year will likely continue to be marked by the path of the pandemic, as well as the fight against inflation. The Federal Reserve signaled Wednesday that it plans to begin raising interest rates at its next meeting in March in an effort to keep a lid on prices, and markets expect 3 additional rate hikes over the course of the year. The central bank's challenge is not to hit the brakes too hard and slow the economy too much, a tricky feat considering some economists believe that the central bank waited too long to tackle inflation in the first place. We do expect some softening in the economy from Omicron, but we think that should be temporary, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell told reporters. We think that the underlying strength of the economy should show through fairly quickly after that. Now, when we talk about the economy and everything like that, and all the stuff that happened in 2021, we do have to remember that there was just some things that were beyond anybody's control. And those things include the supply chain. And as we've said previously, we have a supply chain geared toward just-in-time supply, which means that you don't have a lot of inventory built up. You have as much as you can to get you through the next, I think it's the maximum of 3 months, but generally speaking, less than that. And if there's any breakdown in the supply at all, it's going to take a lot to build it back up. And that's what we're seeing. This might actually destroy just-in-time supply entirely as companies grapple with the inability to sell goods and services. Excuse me. As companies continue to find it hard to provide goods and services. Another thing that has to be mentioned here is that the amount of people that died to COVID in general is more than 6 million people worldwide and more than 800,000 within just the United States. COVID also pushed forward early retirements, early home purchases, etc., up a few years due to a slowing economy and people readjusting and reevaluating their entire lives. So don't expect this to end quickly. Expect it to be a slow process that shows good growth, but not everything going back to normal. Just saying. Now, personally, I believe that what we'll see as far as inflation, we'll see noticeable decreases in the amount of increase of inflation. So if that didn't make any sense to you, basically the rate of growth of inflation will be noticeably slowed, starting when the Fed increases rates. And when with the ending of the child income, the child tax credit, as people go back to work, as the supply chain readjusts itself. And I do see that by July, we'll see more than likely most normal inflation, maybe a little bit elevated, maybe 4 to 5%, but not the 6 and 7% that we're seeing now. And personally, I think 4% inflation is actually probably what the Fed should target. And the reason I say that is because we saw that you can get below 5% unemployment with the right conditions. And so those conditions should continue. And so if you target 4%, if you target 4% inflation, that means the economy runs a little hotter. It means there's more jobs available, gives workers a little bit more benefit. That helps increase wages, etc., and so on and so forth. And so if a person gets a 6-7% raise and inflation's only 4%, they're making out ahead. Whereas if they only get they get no raise, which is what happens typically in the lower end of the economy until they switch jobs or get a better skill or what have you. And even then, maybe not much of a raise, and inflation's 2% or 3%, then they're just plugging along, right? So those are things you have to keep in mind. But let's continue on with the stock market now. So according to US News and World Reports, stock rose in the late morning trading on Wall Street today as markets settled down following several days of whiplash moves, both up and down. Investors were encouraged to see strong figures for US economic growth, which showed the biggest climb in GDP last year since 1984. Markets are still processing the latest indications from the Federal Reserve a date earlier that the central bank is increasingly concerned about inflation and plans to raise interest rates and take other steps to fight it. Soon to fight it. Technology stocks, banks, communications companies, and industrial firms also made solid gains. Utilities and real estate companies, which are considered less risky, lagged behind. The U.S. economy expanded with the strongest calendar year growth since a 7.2 surge in 1984 after a previous recession. It ended the year by growing at an unexpectedly brisk 6.9% annual pace from October through December as businesses replenished their inventories, the Commerce Department reported. The upbeat report came a day after Federal Reserve raised concerns about how quickly it will ease support for markets and the economy. It said it expects it will soon be appropriate to raise interest rates, and investors expect the first in a series of rate hikes to happen in March. The Fed also said it would phase out its monthly bond purchases, which have been intended to lower longer-term risk. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. So the Fed also said it would phase out its monthly bond purchases, which have been intended to lower longer-term rates starting in March. The Fed has been monitoring the impact of inflation on businesses and consumers, and Fed Chair Jerome Powell acknowledged that the pressure isn't lessening. That could mean that the central bank has to take an even more aggressive approach to raising interest rates and removing the support it put in place for markets. Even with Tuesday's gains, every Thursday's gains, every major index is in the red overall for the year. So that's true. And that's due to the tightening of the monetary supply that's expected. People want to realize their gains because they're not going to continue on. So get out while the getting's good. Get it while the getting's good, right? So a lot of people sold off, realized their gains, and that caused the market to plummet. It was a pretty big plummet too. Like Netflix lost like 30% of its value or something like that. So overall, because of it reported that it wasn't going to get more. Didn't get more subscribers than it expected, and the like. And so this is fairly normal. When there is monetary easing, when there is easy liquidity, when loans are cheaper, people are more willing to take risky bets. And sometimes that means just investing in the stock market. So that's what we saw during the pandemic. Is that a lot of companies and a lot of people invested in the stock market, stock market rose. That's why the richest 1% got richer, because more people had a little bit more disposable income and they threw it into the markets. And you have a lot of shares of a company and it goes up by like 5%. Well, you're just made a killing. And so that's partly what we saw. We also saw some fuckery with, closes and stuff like that. But primarily when it came to the asset market, that's what we were seeing. And so when you know that ride's going to end, you're going to get off. And that's what people are doing. They just got off. Now, this isn't to say that if you're a long-term, and I'm not a financial advisor, let me make that clear. But that isn't to say that if you're a long-term investor, you're losing out, because line goes up. It always goes up. In the aggregate, it goes up because more people are born. People want more goods and services. The S&P 500 is a basket of goods that basically is the entire economy, and the NASDAQ, the entire economy. So if you're invested in like index funds, or you're a long-term investor and you're not like just invested in companies that are likely to go bankrupt, you're fine. You're going to recover probably most of the value. So don't panic. Be good. So let's continue on with economic news with the labor market. So Politico reported on remarks today from Federal Chairman Jerome Powell. Powell has emphasized in recent months that stable prices, in essence, tighter monetary policy now, will be essential to see further gains in the labor market over a longer expansion. But are we at maximum employment? Powell made a distinction between maximum employment now and maximum employment over the longer term, suggesting that we may have reached the former, but the latter could be even higher. I would say that most Federal Open Market Committee participants agree that the labor market conditions are consistent with maximum employment in the sense of the highest level of employment that is consistent with price stability. And that is my personal view. But he continued, in this particular situation we're in now, the level of maximum employment that's consistent with stable prices may increase. And we hope that it will be more people come back into the labor market as participation gradually rises. And that the policy path that we are broadly contemplating would be supportive of that outcome as well. Now, let's translate this a little bit, right? So the Federal Open Market Committee is the committee of Federal Reserve bankers that helps guide federal market policy. And when they say that labor market conditions are consistent with maximum employment in the sense that of the highest level of employment that is consistent with price stability, they mean that it is the idea that when employment is tight, when the labor market is very tight, you're going to see rapid rises in cost because, one, more people are buying goods and services because more people have jobs. Two, the number of people that have jobs are competing for those. So for the second point, rather, the employers that are competing for employees have to raise their wages to get those employees to come to their firms. And then you can have it's not a vicious cycle, but you can have this cycle of where, hey, unemployment drops, prices raise because employers need to attract more talent, and that talent's more expensive, so they raise the cost of their goods, and you get this cascading effect, right? And that's how you can get some push inflation from the labor market. So what they're saying here is that right now the conditions are good, but we should be cognizant of what that might look like in the future. So let's continue on. Let's break this down a little bit more. So in the particular situation we're in now, the level of maximum employment that's consistent with stable prices may increase, which means that, hey, we can get unemployment lower and keep prices fairly stable. And so they're hoping that their adjusting of targeted inflation, their increases to the market rate to the Fed market rate, their increases on interest rates will tamp down on inflation, which will pull more people in, which will put more money into the economy because people are able to spend a little bit more because they're not having to spend a lot more of their money on primary goods and services to live, and that will help boost employment because that's going to boost demand. So they're trying to balance out this really seesaw effect of trying to get this equilibrium going. And they think, because of what the pandemic showed, because of what honestly the tax cuts Trump showed, is that we can get unemployment lower than the traditional 4 to 5% and still maintain relative price stability. One of the reasons for that might be because the economy, people are richer, which is kind of weird. But what that means is that because they're more productive, and that means that each worker's productivity means going up means that the actual price of a good goes down, so on and so forth. It's very complicated. Don't get me wrong. It's pretty complicated stuff. But I think that they're doing the right thing here. And if they're not saying that they're targeting 4% inflation, but if that's what they're targeting, I think we could see unemployment stay at around about 3%, which means more people coming into the labor market that are traditionally left out of the labor market, talking ex-felons, disabled people, and not disabled people to like have to work to live, but disabled people that feel like they can contribute to the economy in a way that will net them benefits for doing so, because they will be paid more. And that's good. That's a good thing, that because having a job, despite what a lot of people say, gives you some sense of purpose for a lot of people, and it makes people feel better about themselves when they work. Not everybody, but it does for a lot of people. So that's another thing. And also, one of the things that this might do is actually, this is not very intuitive, but it could also reduce the number of people entering the labor force by a small degree to kind of balance it out. Because if somebody, this is a great example, right? So if somebody is a 2-income household, one of the people in the house makes we'll say just above minimum wage. We'll say, and minimum wage right now is still $7.25 an hour. So let's say they make $10 an hour, but they only work part-time because they have to take care of the kids. The other person makes $18 an hour, right? And together they're able to cobble enough money to like live, right? So let me do some basic math here, all right? So we got $10 an hour, right? For 20 hours a week. So times 4, so that's $800, plus we got $18 an hour for 40 hours a week, times 4. So we got $2,880. We have $3,680 a month, right? Now let's say that the person that made $18 an hour, right, suddenly makes $24 an hour. So that person is making $24 an hour, working 40-hour weeks, and they work, so that's $960 a week, times 4, $3,840. It was basically the same number, right? So the person that was working part-time to live no longer has to do that job. They can actually take that time that they were doing and working to either get better skills, which will make them more productive, which will better their family, or drop out of the labor force entirely, should they choose so, and be a full-time parent. And that is still a net positive. So you can see how these things, this very complicated system, these very complicated balances of things could actually be better for society overall. And I'm hoping that the Fed is right, and I'm hoping that I'm right too. Because if we are, we're going to see not necessarily a golden period, but we're going to see a lot of the problems that people have complained about highly diminish with that. Now, as I was saying with all this, we're seeing wage increases as well. So this is a great segue for wage increases. So we're saying that wage increases are at an all-time high. This reporting is from Staffing Industry Analysis. So U.S. workers' wages rose 4.3% year over year in the fourth quarter, up from 3.2% average in the third quarter, according to ADP Research Institute's Workforce Vitality Report, released on January 26. In December, wage growth for both job holders and job switchers hit an all-time high of 5.9% and 8% respectively. Now, one of the things that should be noted here is that in the economy that we have, it is often better for a person to switch jobs to get a pay raise than to stick with a job. Because once a person has you, they don't need to compete for you, right? They feel like they have that stability, so they're going to give you a lower wage increase. So if you're in the mood, if you're wanting a pay raise and you think you got the skills to compete in this market, hey, start looking while you have a job and maybe you'll get a better offer. The average wage rose $1.33 year over year to $31.53 per hour. Quote, ADP data shows U.S. wage growth increased 4.4% on average for all workers in December of 2021, with job switchers and younger job holders seeing the largest wage growth, said Nella Richardson, chief economist for ADP. Leisure and hospitality, which experienced the greatest job loss due to the pandemic, was a notable exception to this overall trend. I wonder why. While leisure and hospitality led in employment gains in the first half of 2021, it is the only industry where job switchers' wages were basically flat on average in December of 2021 compared to the previous year. There's reasons for this, right? They're not well respected. Maybe they're not well respected in the industry. They're tightening the amount of people they have. They're offering less services because less people are still going out than they were. So now individual wage growth measures provide a more precise view of how the pandemic and a tight labor market are impacting wages, according to the report. Job holders' wages in December of 2021 surged 5.9% from December 2020, an all-time high level of growth. But wage growth among job switchers has been the biggest beneficiary of current labor market conditions, as firms are struggling to find available workers. Job switchers' wage growth averaged 7.5% in the fourth quarter, up from 4.7% at the beginning of 2021. The impact of the pandemic has varied across many dimensions, including gender. Overall, wage growth for men and women each bottomed out just above 1% in May. However, since that time, female wage growth has surged to 5.7%, while the increase for men has been much more tepid at only 3.4% in December. Why is that the case? That's an interesting thing to kind of ponder on. So if I had to guess, and this is really just a guess, this is an educated guess, but it's still just a guess, is that women have moved into more higher end industries than men have. And so we're seeing that the overall growth of women as like an average has exceeded men because of that. And this is what we're seeing. This could be partly due to the fact that more women are graduating from college than men now. It's not a lot. I think it's like 55% to like 45% of the overall college graduates are women to men. It might even be lower. It might be 52-48. It's not a huge number, but it's noticeable, and it's a concern. And that could be part of the reason for that. It could also be that maybe men went back to work sooner than women did, and they're less likely to quit their job. And because, let's be real, women typically take care of the family and kids. And so when the pandemic hit and people lost their jobs, men probably were more likely to start looking sooner and maybe getting those jobs earlier, which would contribute to lower wage increases. There's a whole host of different things. So those are my guesses for that. They should be investigating. It'd be very interesting to see. It would be very interesting to see what the numbers actually show, but that is for another time. Now, what we like to do on the news roundup to close out our weekly news roundups is talk a little bit about some news of the weird. And this week, we are coming at you with Tucker Carlson and those woke ass M&Ms. So let's listen to Tucker complain about the changes that Mars has made to M&Ms.
Finally tonight, we don't usually give story tips to NPR, but here's a story they might want to cover pretty soon and doubtless will. M&M's, the candy company, has just announced that it's redesigning its cartoon characters to be more gender inclusive.
They're fucking candies. Jesus Christ.
Bet you didn't think M&Ms were pushing intolerance, but they were. They've been.
Oh God, Tucker. What was? How's his face go? Hold on. Maybe we can do it. Hold on. Was that close? I think that was close. But Tucker, work with me here, dude. Just work with me here. They didn't change like jack shit. Really, they got rid of some boots for some flats, dude. Like, come on. And this is the marketplace of ideas in the works, right? This is what we're seeing here is a little bit of like quote unquote woke capitalism, which is just like, oh shit, we need to connect to these young people these days. What are we gonna do? Oh, I know what we're gonna do. We're gonna make the green M&M less sexy. Yeah, that'll do it. The green M&M was too sexy, guys. Let's try. Let's continue though.
Been changed. You're seeing the changes right now on your screen. The green M&M, you will notice, is.
Oh, let me pause this. And I'll hide my camera so that you can see it. So, oh no, what happened?
The green M&M, you will notice, is.
So, it's loading on me for some reason. But as you can see, the green M&M. If I can rewind this.
You're seeing the changes right.
There we go. Green.
Now on your screen. The green M&M, you will notice, is.
Oh my god. The horror of flats. So I'm gonna reload this page because I think that's why it's not working. And let me put my camera back on. Camera. There we go. Oh, ads. That was probably what it was then. Let me guess. It's an ad, right? Yep. I had it paused for too long. So we're gonna let this ad go. We're gonna come back over. We're gonna end with this. I wanted to see that whole segment. So hopefully I don't get dinged by Twitch or YouTube on it. Whatever. This is fair use, I say. Fair use. I am significantly contributing to this discussion. I'm sticking to that. All right. So let's go back. There we go. And maximize and skip forward. Go and then
M&Ms were pushing intolerance, but they've been changed. You're seeing the changes right now on your screen. The green M&M, you will notice, is no longer wearing sexy boots. Now she's wearing sensible sneakers. Why the change? Well, according to M&M's, quote, we all win when we see more women in leading roles because leading women do not wear sexy boots. Leading women wear frumpy shoes. The frumpier the better. Shoes. That's the rule.
That's the rule, everybody.
The other big change is that the brown M&M has, quote, transitioned from high stilettos to lower block heels. Also less sexy. That's progress. M&Ms will not be
less sexy, everybody. M&Ms, who knew that the great cultural divide of our times would be highlighted by fucking round chocolate stuffed candies. All from the changing of shoes. What is it with, like, this isn't the first time a right-wing pundit has had something weird with feet and shoes. Like, I don't get it. Can someone explain this to me? I really want to know what is going on. I don't think I'm gonna learn from him what's going on with his little, like, face, but I don't understand. Like, what they took from you is apparently that good green cushy. So, but let's continue.
Be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous. Until the moment you would.
I don't know about you, but I still read the green and brown M&Ms as female. Maybe it's the lashes, right? Look. Can you see? Oh, I can't zoom in. But can you see the lashes? Doesn't that look a little feminine? Maybe it's not just the shoes, right? Like they could be wearing nothing, and you would still probably read that as a woman.
Wouldn't want to have a drink with any one of them. That's the goal.
Why would you want to have a drink with a fucking M&M? What the fuck is wrong with you?
When you're totally turned off, we've achieved equity.
Yes, we have. That's true, because apparently, in Tucker Carlson's mind, a the whole idea is to make women not sexy, everybody, and that starts with the M&Ms.
They've won. Meanwhile, in a nod to the burgeoning wellness movement, the orange M&M will, quote, acknowledge and embrace his anxiety. And actually, if you look at him, the orange M&M does appear very anxious. Maybe he doesn't like all the ugly new shoes he sees around him. Maybe he...
The orange M&M was always, what is the term neurotic? In all the cartoons, the orange M&M is always like, oh my God, I'm freaking out, man. Like, come on, dude. Shut the... I'm done with this. I am done with this. Also played it for 1 minute and 45 seconds, which is told us how long I need to play this. So I don't know. Wait, like this is probably one of the more strange, like, no, I wouldn't say more strange news of the weirds. It's more the mainstream news strangeness of news of the weirds we brought you. And what are your thoughts, man? Like, am I reading too much into this? Thank you, Captain Nugget. Appreciate that. Yes. Yes, hold on. Let me get your comment on screen. Yes. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yep, Tucker is such an intellectual. Yeah, he's only high-minded here. I get maybe, you know what? I think we just discovered that Tucker Carlson is secretly a weeb that wants to fuck anime characters. But for him, it's cartoon M&Ms. That's what we're seeing here. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But with that, everybody, I am sad to say that we are out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end, and we thank you for that, because without you, we would just be a couple of people shouting into the void that is the internet. If you know what we do here, we're part of like a nonprofit. We run Facebook groups, we run debate groups, and that sort of thing. So we want to shout out to our Facebook community for their ideas and their suggestions that go into the show. And if you want to get in on that, but you don't do Facebook, get on Twitter, get on Discord and everything like that, and tell us what you want to hear, right? And also special thanks to the producer of the show, Nikki Adams, because without her, I would be spending a fuck ton more time getting this together for y'all. Probably a little more discombobulated with that because she actually writes the copy and does a lot of research for the show. And I'm like a personality now. So, hey, Nikki Adams, thank you again so much for this. So we do this every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, give or take about 15 minutes. And that's what we do. So be sure to check this out every Thursday. We also do another show called Cypher State. Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that tackles an issue facing geopolitical stage, kind of with the same kind of thing, just a little more in depth than we do here. Like we said, join the Discord, join the Tribune Commons, join our Twitter, and be sure to stay tuned for everything that we have coming at you in the new year. Stick around for about 10-20 seconds or so. We're going to raid in if you're on Twitch. And if you're not on Twitch, hey, go over to Twitch. And actually, we're going to raid Tiberius D. Tiberius D is a friend of the show. Tiberius D helps us with Cypher State. He's a constant. He's been there since the beginning, basically. I've been always there. He's very knowledgeable about foreign relations. Very knowledgeable about demography. So we're going to raid in him. He's on somebody else's show tonight, looks like, having a discussion. So we're going to raid him. And with that, everybody, keep your head up through the political storm. I think that worked. Oh, it didn't work, did it? Hold on. I'm bad at this. I'm sorry. Where is it? Okay, cool. Rating now. Ta-ta.